Masad dentures, pound turbofill technique, and Nobel clinician. He is also one of the first technicians in the U.S. to train in the BDT technique. His passion for continuous education led him to become a founding member of the Chicagoland Dental Technician Study Group, hosting respected speakers such as Michelle, I'm gonna mess this up, Imagine, I'm sure he can correct me here in a minute, Don Cornell, and Jack Turbofill, to name a few. Mark has served as president of the Marvin Health Study Club and the Illinois Dental Laboratory Association. He's an experienced chairside all-on-4 specialist, teaches other technicians to master chairside conversions. In September of 2017, he was the first place winner of the Panthera Dental Master Cup. Mark's passion to share his experiences and knowledge has brought him to the lecture circuit for Ottawa Dental Laboratory, Cole Yamahachi Dental USA, KOL Whipmix, Nobel Biocare, Panthera Dental. Mark was named CDT of the Year in 2019. Give a warm welcome to our speaker, please, Mark.
I hope you can hear me. I hope in that long introduction, he got to mention, I don't know if he did, but I'm a pretty good bass fisherman, so we can put that in there too for next time. So, but hi to everybody in Grapevine, Texas. I've been in that area one time before. I have a sister that lives in San Antonio. She's 7 years younger than me, just like me, longer hair, thinner, better looking, right? So anybody there from San Antonio, if you're here, say hi. I know one of the things that I did when I went out there to visit her, some of the things you have to see when you're out in Texas. I know there's plenty to see, but Salt Lick, a barbecue place, I think it's between San Antonio and Austin, and it was excellent. I bought their cookbook, loved it. I have not been to Franklin's in Austin. I hear that's just as good too. So, but anyway, just a quick note. I had a 23-year wedding anniversary a couple of days ago, and I woke up and I told my wife, I'm like, happy anniversary. You know, she's like, oh, it only seems like 5 minutes. And then she continued with underwater. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, thanks. So no, I'm just kidding. But anyway, I wanted to thank Mr. Matt Douglas and the president and the 2020 DLAT board for having me and Yamahachi speak with you guys today. I know it's kind of towards the end of the seminar. I've been watching some things on live streaming Facebook. I just think it's amazing how we can connect with everybody and without having to leave our homes. And so it's just awesome. You guys have done a great job. I've never have spoken for the Southwest Conference Expo before, so this will be my first time. And so if you like me, let me know. Well, let's get going here. All right. So I'd like to thank Yamahachi. They're the ones that are sponsoring me today to be here and help share with you today. I know Lisa Brewer-Metcalf is there today. I think maybe a lot of you already know her, but she's the South Regional Manager down for Yamahachi USA. And Larry Greenwald, the president, and Ralph Lauer are pretty good friends of mine. We've had a pretty good relationship over the past few years, and some amazing products and things that we use. So I don't mind speaking for companies that are nice people and respectful and have good products. So I hope you all feel the same. So one of the biggest things I always like to share with everybody is being on social media. And you can follow some great technicians around the world. I'll show some of their photos within the slides today. You'll see some of that. But this picture of the guy kind of laying out there on that ATV was a TikTok video. It was him and this guy, and he's holding on to the back And, you know, his feet are planted, he's looking straight ahead, and they take off this big ramp, and they fly in midair. And as they're in midair, this guy like lays out like on a BMX motorcycle, looks at the camera, and then he goes back into his original position, and the ATV lands perfectly. And it's just like that conversation had to start like, hold my beer, watch this, you know, type of thing. So I wish I could have recorded the video. It's funnier with the video, but you can kind of get a sense of what it looks like. So today what I want to talk about is kind of the foundation to all implant supported prosthetics, and you know, how we go here at Ottawa Dental Lab, how we go and we restore these cases, how we support our doctors. I know if you see me speak in the past, I'm pretty passionate about it. I've talked quite a bit about this. So let's get started. So with the foundation, you have to kind of know where we're coming from. It's not just a matter of making the final prostheses. And I think we all do that now, or do some of them. I don't know how many you do or don't do, but it really starts with the foundation of the implants being placed in the day of surgery. And so I just want to go through so you can see what we have to begin with, what the patient goes through, what their experience is. And it's taken a long time from when the patient goes into the dental office thinking about getting implants and maybe doing an all-on-4 or some sort of full roundhouse implant prosthetic. You know, it's been a long time from that point to the day of surgery. So they're anxious, they're waiting, you know, and I think we're in an instant society now, right? We want things fast. I want to pull up to Dunkin' Donuts. I want to get my coffee. I want it now. I don't want to wait, you know? And so it's kind of like that. People are in a hurry and they want to get it quick. Not to say that we should hurry on these. Obviously, we need to take the time. It needs to be properly planned and prepared for. But we'll start with the conversion the day of surgery. We are there to support our restorative dentists and the surgical partners that we work with. But typically, this is you know, obviously a one-day type procedure, maybe a half a day, sometimes the majority of the day, but it's about 4 to 6 hours typical. Typically, surgery is about 2 to 3 hours, where they will go ahead and make sure they record the video. You'll see that. I'll show you that. Implants are placed, abutments are placed, the denture is indexed, the patient suture, and now the conversion time is. And that's what we do. We help restorative doctor. I don't work in the mouth. I help patients, or I help doctors convert the prostheses. Typically, it's a full denture, and we'll do a pickup. I'll show you that. And we will convert it that day right there. And patients are leaving with an instant smile. You know, maybe they've had some, you know, periodontal disease. Maybe there's some infections going on, some really bombed out teeth. They might be in pain. And that day, when you take that out and you do your bone reduction, you take the teeth out, the bone reduction, you clean them all up, you've taken that infection out of the way, and it really helps them. It's going to make them a little bit, obviously, more healthier. So we're going to modify the denture. We're going to pick up temporary copings. You'll hear me talk about that. Conversion. This is just going to be a small part of it. I will get to the prosthetics of it, but I want you to see where we're coming from, because we partner in the beginning. This could be a good business practice for the laboratory to partner with surgeons, partner with you know, the restorative doctors, and be a team approach. And I talk about that quite a bit. So typically you're going to start out with a denture. It could be a digital denture as long as you mill it out of the PMMA material or some sort of PMMA puck, you know, for the teeth. Typically we use teeth. We use Yamahachi teeth a lot, obviously. And then we will take that clear denture, or that denture, and we will duplicate it in a clear material, and then we'll modify it to help the surgeon the day of surgery. So this is what the conversion denture may look like at the end of the day. The conversion, it may look kind of beat up. You know, it's not the best. I will say that one's not mine, but I think a prosthodontist that I know kind of worked with that, and they do it chair side. and time is of the essence. We have to get these cases done. So this is how the patient walks in and taking some photos. This is what they look like the day of, and this is what they can look like later in the day when they're ready to head home. Now this picture might have taken a couple of days later, things like that, but you can kind of get a sense of what they look at. And it becomes emotional, and you'll see that. So let's go through real quick on the conversion process. So one person to follow on Facebook would be Richard Greenleaf. He's a denturist out of New Zealand. You can get more information there. So let's look at this video. I'm going to fast forward this video here a little bit because it's kind of a long video. I have a lot of slides and things I want to show you, and we just don't really have the time to kind of watch the whole thing, but I'm going to stop at each important part here. So we're looking at the profile, looking at the patient, and she's having a lower done. You can see those are the teeth that are going to be extracted. These are some of the, some of the sites. You can see the mental foramen there, right there on a buccal. And so the surgeon needs to know that, needs to know these landmarks. And these things are all done pre-surgical, so it isn't like they're just looking at it the first time of the day of surgery. So here's the other mental foramen. You can kind of see it. I'm going to turn that down a little bit because I want to make sure that you can hear me. But what they're doing is marking the VDO, the vertical dimension of occlusion, and they'll put a spot. We don't want to lose that because once you extract the teeth and you flap the tissue, then you're kind of lost. You have no more reference point. So this will be your reference point. So the teeth are extracted, the tissue is flapped. And now this clear dupe that I made, I had cut the flange, and we'll talk more about it. I had cut the flange at 15. You can kind of see it there from the incisal edge of the lower anteriors to the flange. That's 15. That's the magic number we need. We need 15 millimeters of restorative space. So the doctor is now doing the alveoloplasty or the bone reduction and getting it ready for the conversion, finishing the process. So you can see the bone reduction's done. There's a couple of spots they may adjust a little bit, maybe in there, it's still up a little bit. Because you got to remember your restorative space isn't measured necessarily from the height of the implant. It's more of the restorative space from the crest of the tissue after it's healed to the occlusal plane. So you need that 15 millimeters of space for restorative prostheses. So here they're doing their drilling protocol. I think we kind of all know how that's done. They, up-step the different drills. Here's kind of an aggressive implant. I believe that's a Nobel active tapered, and they're going to get a really good torque. You want to get about 35 Newton centimeters of torque. They're going to hand torque this now into the lower. And the lower is usually a stronger bone. It's a different type bone. The upper is more kind of a softer bone, and we're starting to see more doctors put 6 implants in on the upper versus 4. It's just a preference, but we're seeing that more and more. So now they have the denture with the lingual trough that I put in there, so they can kind of see that they're within the realm of where the denture teeth are. And these are the multi-unit abutments that are on, and the showing the access where the screw holes are going to be coming through. And we know they look pretty parallel. So we know they'll be coming out through the occlusal of the denture. So here they're just checking the fit of it. They're going to do a wash impression. So I know where to drill the holes for the temporary copings and that are going to fit on top of those multi-unit abutments and fit passively and not interfere with rubbing on them. So the patient will bite down into occlusion. Now I know where I need to open up the access holes in this denture. So while I'm doing that, the doctor will start suturing. Temporary copings are now going on. These temporary copings will be luted to that denture. We have 4. You can see they're pretty parallel and ready for pickup. So I don't want to get too much into that because I'm going to show you a little bit more of that process, but you can see we're opening these up. We're just drilling a hole right through there. You can kind of see that. They're going to try it in, make sure everything fits over, making sure our VDO is good, that we're spot on. The bite's good. So now we prepare it with the material to pick it up. So here they're adding a little bit of Vaseline on the teeth to keep acrylic from sticking to it. I don't necessarily do that much because it's a highly polished acrylic, and if they get some acrylic on it, I can just flake it off. It doesn't really bond. Rubber dam is being put in place to protect the sutures. It's just going to be a thin covering over the crest of the ridge and the sutures. They're going to block out the access holes with impression material. And then we go ahead and we add a pickup material, self-curing pickup material. I've used acrylic in the past. It heats up, it smells. You have to irrigate, cool it down while it's curing. Today, there's more and more different pickup material that you can use, and I'll show you what I use a little bit coming up later on here. So they go ahead and have the patient bite down and hold that in place, making sure our VDO is good, and we're waiting for the material to set up. They'll go ahead and remove the impression material that they use to block out the access hole so our acrylic doesn't get into that. And then they will go ahead and unscrew that. And then from this point, what I do is they hand it to me. I take the screws out, I peel out the rubber dam, and I rinse it, I disinfect it, I put clean gloves on, and I work with it at that point. Basically, what we're doing is going to backfill this in with actually a PMMA. I use GC Trad material. I'll show you that also later. But we want to backfill this in because the intaglio here needs to be kind of a convex or flat or convex type of surface to it. We don't want any sort of convexity. We don't want food to get trapped in there, a patient get in there and clean it. And we don't want any flanges. We don't want any cantilever for the temporary. We can cantilever farther back when we do the final. But you can kind of see here, let me fast forward this, where we're shaping it, we're contouring it, we get it polished, and this would be typically what it may look like the day of surgery. We want to get them a temp. Remember, the patient's been in the chair for quite a while. So at this point, when you're doing the conversion, they want to get it in, adjust the bite, and they want to get the patient home to start recovery. So they can see the patient within the next day or two. They can fine tune the bite. They can get it closed. But there you can kind of see that's where we're at. And they will torque those little screws. Again, then the magic number 15. The little prosthetic screws are 15. But I would check with the implant brand that you're using, like BioHorizons, I believe is a little different. Straumann, whoever you're using, just make sure that you are following the torque recommendations. So how do these all start? Basically, we're making an upper and lower maxillary denture, right? We want the same communication, and if we're making a denture, right? What arch is going to be restored? What's the VDO? Are we maintaining it? Are we changing it? What's the plane of occlusion? Is it level, or are we going to have to level it out? Maybe it's already canted to one side. The tooth display, am I following a certain tooth number for inside the ledge length and position, or are we going to change that? These are things you'll want to ask, and we have a checklist. If you're more willing to share it with you, things that we need. At the end, I'll have my email address. I can share anything you want from this presentation. You can email me. I can answer any questions like that. So this is how the patient presents. You can see we might be following the inside of the ledge length of 9. I mean, it depends. We want to get these photos. I want to know when I'm setting these denture teeth, right? I want to know what am I following. Maybe like I said, 8's a little too long, kind of canted a little bit. And then there's my 15 millimeter space. We're going to follow that inside the edge of that lower anterior, and that's the restorative space we're going to need for any of these type of implants. Whether you're going to be doing a full zirconia, some sort of PMMA, Crystal Ultra. I mean, you can maybe get away with a little bit less room on some of those types of cases. I would follow whatever you're going to make. Look at that rule of thumb, but typically it's 15. And so these study models, things that we want to know that we're going to build it upon. So these are the photos typically that we would get, right? Full face, the lip at repose, a full smile, our left and right lateral, occlusal tail, retracted. I mean, these are just things that you would want to have to help build this denture. Photos are not uncommon anymore, right? With cell phones, we can get them text to us right away, right at chairside. So having that issue of getting these photos really shouldn't be an issue anymore. Doctors can start with the typical alginate impression. I like the AccuDent system. You can use whatever you want. We're going to get some sort of bite registration. This patient happens to be edentulous, but a lot of these patients are still have natural dentition still. And so you might be making a bite rim around it, or maybe they have a lot of teeth, or what part of their teeth are left. You might take just a bite registration and you'll make it from there. Everybody does it a little bit differently. Every patient's a little bit different. You can get a face bow, by all means, yes. This is the case communication. The doctor sent it to me and said, use the inside the ledge in number 9, but I want the CEJ raised up and I want that tooth to be about 12 millimeters in length. So it's just really good communication to give me this. And so we go ahead and we set that up. I don't want to lose that vertical. Kind of see where we're at, and then we make the denture, and then we make the clear duplicate. That clear duplicate, I want to talk about. I know some people ask me, but like I said, what I want to do is from the inside of the ledge down towards the vestibule where the flange is, I cut it at 15, because when the doctor seats it in the mouth, they can get a quick visual when they see that the tissue's flat. Did I reduce enough bone, or am I level? Do I need to go one way or the other? You know, without doing a fully guided surgical guide type of system, this is something that we see a lot of people use, especially in the Chicagoland area here, are doing something like that, you know, with these types of clear surgical dupes. We are seeing some more full arch surgical guides as they become more popular, but it seems like some people maybe don't do them because they're more experienced, they've already been doing it, they don't need the cost of that, but I mean, that's a whole different story, a whole different argument. You can see I scribed a 30-degree line there, and if the doctor wants to see this and position his pilot drill and then angle it to make sure he's at that 30-degree angle in the posterior, or he or she can go ahead and they have a visual reference of where they're at. Now, I know Nobel makes a metal guide they could put in and do that, you know, just as well. But these have worked really well. I put a lingual trough in there. I need those implants to be in that area, that position. It helps us position the angled multi-unit abutments. There are straight multi-unit abutments that we use typically in the anterior and in the posterior. On a typical all-on-4 Palomalo type of case, is they are angling the implant back 30 degrees to help increase our cantilever length and how far we can go back with the final prostheses. It all helps with more bone contact. I mean, there's a lot of literature about why that works. But this is just something you can make. Like I said, it's just made from a denture duplication and making it clear. This patient happened to be edentulous. We were able to try this in, or the doctor was able to try it in, see how it fit, how the bite was. Don't want any surprises the day of surgery. You are using the palate as a stop, as your reference point. I know sometimes during surgery, doctors want to push on the anterior, and the anterior kind of get pushed upwards, and it's not. The palate is really your seat. That's your stop. So I always tell them, make sure they're pushing up on the palate when they seat that, because that's where, otherwise your teeth that you set, they could be now positioned upwards higher, and now when the patient bites down, you're hitting pretty well on the posteriors first. You have a big anterior open bite, the teeth are up. So you want to make sure that the palate's fully seated. If it's a lower, you want to rest it back on the retromolar path. That's why it's important to have that in your impression, all the landmarks, all the denture landmarks that you need, and that would be your stop for your lower. Now, sometimes we can put a little bit of a blue moose stop in the anterior between implants to help. Before we do that, we can place that in there inside the denture, have the patient bite down, and you'll have kind of a tripod type of stop. But that's something that you can do also. So again, the marking of the VDO, here you can see the guide. Doctor's doing a quick reference that I reduced enough bone. And I will tell you, in you as technician, you probably already know this, right? the biggest mistake in these types of cases is not enough bone reduction. Let me go back. So let me go forward. So yeah, I mean, typically, I think that's why zirconia, in my opinion, got very popular, right? For a couple of reasons. Any sort of breakage to any typical hybrid, you know, and we don't have enough restorative space for that bar and the acrylic and the P, so we make a monolithic zirconia in there. So, and not say it's a good or a bad prosthesis, it's just a prosthesis that we have, but I believe it's become popular because of this. We don't have enough restorative space, and we have to make something, right? We have to give the patient something that they can withstand and withhold and hold up to, you know, the forces of chewing and eating and bruxing if they have that sort of parafunctional habit. Here, we put a guide pin in just to kind of see the angulation of the implant, where we're at, what sort of multi-unit abutment we might put on. Typically, multi-unit abutments are available in a 17-degree, 30-degree, and a straight. So typically, like I said, the angled abutments are in the posterior. In the anterior, they're typically straight. But I've done them where we've done 17-degree angled in the anterior, just so our access holes don't go through facial. So yes, so it could be mixed or match. And that's really up to the surgeon. That's not up to you. That's not, when I'm chairside, I'm not necessarily making that decision. They may ask my opinion. They may put the guide in, have that pin in, say, Mark, what do you think? Do we need to put a 17 in there? And if I feel like, well, from what I could tell, yeah, I think we definitely wouldn't be better off with the 17-degree type of multi-unit abutment. So they'll go ahead and put that in, and we'll look at it before it's finalized and torqued in and make sure we made the right choice before we go further. So I know this is a lot. I mean, this conversion type of seminar or lecture could really be a good half a day or a full day type of thing. So we're just kind of touching on some of the key components, some of the basics, and you know, the data is there, right? We know that an all-on-4 works. It's been around. So the implant survival rate is usually really well, unless there's, you know, yes, there are some issues. It's not for everybody. Maybe a medical condition, why maybe that person wouldn't be good for that. Maybe a different avenue would need to go. But typically, if you can get these implants in and you can get them at 30, 35 Newton centimeters of torque when they're placed, then by all means, you know, it works well. Now, let's say you're there the day of conversion and the doctor puts in the implants and they can't get that 30, maybe it's less, maybe it's 15 or whatever it is. Then they would probably just put cover screws on, get the implants placed, put the cover screws on, suture up, and the patient's going home with a denture. And typically the dentures or the patients are aware of that. You know, sometimes you're not sure. I know in CT scans, you have a good judge of that by measuring the density and things like that. But I think out of all of the conversions I've ever done, I think I could count on one hand that times that the patient may have went home with a denture. Typically with these aggressive implants now, meaning a very aggressive thread, tapered implant, I mean, they can get that torque pretty much most of the time and has been a non-issue, especially for the lowers. Typically, I see it more in the uppers. So again, you want your implant length to be about 10 millimeters length, greater stability. Again, 35 I was talking about. The cross-arch stabilization is huge with these all-on-4s. We are, you know, loading onto 4 implants. We're tying them all together at that time, so that helps with that. And we don't have any cantilevers. Sometimes the patient's going home with the screw-retained prostheses with maybe just 2 bicuspids and all the anteriors, you know, so maybe they're like 10 teeth. So, and that's okay. They know that. This is just for temporization. So the multi-unit abutments this is just kind of general what they typically look like. So you can see here the screw that goes in, actually goes through the multi-unit abutment and into the implant. On an angled abutment, even though they're a longer screw, for the Nobel, they're at 15. You don't torque those to 30, 35. The little prosthetic screws, the tiny prosthetic screws, those are at 15. Okay, when you do the straight, you can see the straight has a hex head on it. You don't use a hex driver. You use almost like a thumb driver, like a socket that fits over the top of that, and then that's torqued. That's how those get torqued down. The screw is built into that abutment. Where here, for the multi-unit, the screw is separate and it goes through, okay? These are typical of all multi-unit abutments. Again, the design of the straight, that's how they're packaged. They have a yellow handle that's to the top. It's a carrier that the surgeon can use to carry it intraorally and help position it. And also it's a great tool for looking at the angulation, especially on the multi-unit. There's that thumb driver I was talking about. Here's the multi-unit. The carrier there screws into where the little prosthetic screw will go into. And you can have access to the driver on the side of it where the angle is. And again, that screw is torqued at 15. You can see that there, how that's packaged. Get yourself familiar with the parts and pieces if you're going to, get into this game and do more conversions or start doing conversions is to really, and I'll show you here, it'll be coming up, that you can get some models and some things and practice with the parts and pieces. Do a conversion on a model before you go and do one. Maybe do it a few times. So here's where they're placing that multi-unit abutment. I don't want to get too involved with this, but you can see we're trying to get it up and making sure we're straight. Are we good? Are we going to position it more lingual? Does that seem more buccal? And again, that's up to the surgeon, the restorative doctor, and sometimes I am asked about that. So that's typically how it will look, right? Okay, the day of surgery, they're all done. Implants are in, patients sutured up, ready to go. And now we're ready to go ahead and, we're going to be having our conversion. We'll be putting in the temporary. But this is what it'll look like when it's healed. It's amazing what the human body can do, how it recovers and heals itself and repairs itself. And, it's just a nice, healthy, clean environment. No more perio, no more bombed out teeth, no more pain. So it's a great foundation. So I get asked, what do I take? What do I use? What do I need to bring to an office? And I do bring a bench lathe too. It's not in this picture, but I seat it down where my handpiece is, and and it's pretty heavy. It comes apart. I have different, 2 boxes, one that fits on top of the other, but all the basic things you'll need, and I have a list of it, and I'll be more than happy to give you my list of what I feel, you would need to do a conversion. So again, the multi-units are positioned. We take a wash impression. So now you are working with the restorative doctor. So I typically will hold the denture. The doctor's ready. I'll put a wash inside the denture. They seat it, have the patient bite into occlusion, and I'm getting this index so I know where I need to drill these holes. So I start drilling the holes while the doctor may be suturing. I'm just getting this prepared now. So typically that's where we're at. So here they're kind of trying it in, and they're going to do the wash and do the pickup. We want to make sure nothing's binding or anything like that. Here, it's just kind of a test run. The patient is still flap. Some doctors may do the conversion with it still flap, but a lot of times they're sutured before we start the conversion. So again, the temporary components is the temporary cylinder, the temporary coping. And that's a prosthetic screw. Maybe keep some of these with you. Keep some extra screws. They are tiny. They get dropped, and you don't want to be on the floor looking around for the screws. And just say I have a couple extra. But this is what it'll look like. And then you can any implant rep, whatever company it is, usually has these types of kits that you can look at, feel, touch. You can get a model, a silicone model. You can have a denture fabricated to fit on it, just something ideal set up, process it. I know some have dentures already made for them, but you could just sit with your client, the restorative doctor. I think it's great for the restorative doctor too. We've done events where, you know, we'll sit with our restorative doctors that we invite, have a nice dinner, and everybody gets to sit and do a conversion. We bring some hand pieces, and, you know, it's not polished or anything because, you know, we can only bring so much, but it's a good way for them to get a feel for these parts instead of trying to get a feel of it the day of surgery and they've never touched these components before and not know how they work. So it's really important to make sure that you definitely work with this. So again, you can do a wash, you can drill the access holes, you get to put the temporary copings on, you can work with the little screws, and that's how they're seated. And that's how you want it to seat. I would still relieve this acrylic a little more here. You can see the access hole is more towards the facial than it is the lingual. Maybe here a little bit lingual mesial is where I would relieve it. But you want them to fit like socks on a rooster, right? You don't want them binding against each other, and you want to be able to have the patient bite into it and feed it without rubbing or hitting, being dictated by the denture rubbing on the temporary coping. So this is a pickup material I use a lot. I used to use a material called Muco Hard. I know some of my clients still use Muco Hard. I like the UP Gel Hard C. I know they make a chair side pickup. Whatever you want, try a couple, see what you like the best. They all are pretty decent. They work well. The Unifast Trad, I don't necessarily use that for the pickup, but I'll use that when I'm backfilling the denture. So the denture, I've already picked up the temp copings, right? You saw that, they're bloody. I peel out the rubber dam, I rinse it, I disinfect it, put new gloves on, and I start now adding acrylic and monomer, and I go ahead and build up that acrylic, and I make sure the temporary cylinders are completely bonded with material. You can take the temporary cylinders with you. I didn't mention this. One of the things you can do is, if you're going to bring the temp cylinders, you can have a chance to maybe aerobrate them before you do it. They bond really well. You know how acrylic really bonds to metal when you've aerobrated it, especially if you use some GC primer or something like that. But the Trad is more for backfilling once the temp is out of the mouth. And I do use this Stellar. I had gotten this actually from Yamahachi. It's from Taub, but this stuff works really nice too. What's nice is the dual cure. So where the Voco gel, the one that I use, the UP Gel Hard, that's just a self-cured. The Stellar is more of a dual cure. So if the doctor wants to hit it with the light cure, again, they want to speed it up because of the patient's waiting for this. And now, they're getting cleaned up. You're in the back in the lab, getting this prosthesis ready so we can seat it, put the screws in, torque it. Doctor can adjust the bite, and the patient wants to go home. It's been a long day. So these materials have worked really well for me from my experience. Again, for the coping pickup, you can lay a rubber dam in one piece like that. Typically, what I've been doing now is cutting rubber dam pieces, maybe about the size of a nickel, maybe a little bit bigger, not as quite as big as a quarter. I can do them in circles. I cut them in squares. And then I have a rubber dam hole punch and just pop the hole through it. And if you've ever worked with rubber dam, maybe you have it, because as technicians, we typically don't use that. But for this particular, for conversions, you will, and you know that it's just hard to cut, manipulate. And so this actually looks really nice, covering the whole field there, and not going to pick up, the acrylic's not going to pick up onto any sutures. So either way, however you want to do it, again, I'm here to help, whatever you need. So now it's in the patient's mouth. They're picked up. They're waiting for the material to set. And this is what it may typically look like. And you might say, hey, Mark, that temp coping in the lingual there is a little tall. But you know what? It didn't interfere with our bite. So I don't mind. If the posterior ones were taller, right, they wouldn't be able to bite into occlusion. So the doctor would have to take that out. I would have to cut a notch or two down, and to get it, at occlusal or just slightly below occlusal level, so it doesn't interfere with the bite. But if it happens on the lower and the linguals, if they're longer, I'm like, let's not waste the time cutting it out. Once it's glued in, I can go ahead and cut that down and bevel it, rubber wheel it, polish it, make it really nice and smooth. So again, typically when it comes out of the mouth and the restorative doctor does hand it to you, just take an Explorer, one of the instruments there, and just poke through the intaglio here and push out the screws and give them the screws. You don't need the screws to be doing the conversion. So give them the screws so they're not lost or you don't lose them, or rinse them down the drain. I've had people that have done that where they take it, they go to rinse it. I've had doctors do that too. They take it out of the mouth, they carry it to the lab, run it under water, and the screws go down the drain. So you want to just make sure it takes it out. And then what I do is I take in any other instrument and I kind of push on the coping there, right in that dome there. I just want to put some pressure on it and try to wiggle it and see if they're movable. Because if they're movable, the acrylic didn't get around there all the way and they're mobile. And if you don't address it at this point, put it back in, add more acrylic to make it stable. If you just backfill it with acrylic, then when the doctor goes to put it in, that screw's not going to go in. It's not lined up, even if it's off a little bit. These fit so precision, so you want to make sure. And I like doing it in front of the doctor and the team there because we all see it at the same time if it is. I don't want to take it back to the lab and then they think everything is good and they're ready for their next step of getting the patient cleaned up and and then thinking that I did something in the back to loosen it. So I just like to show them right then and there. It's just my own little personal way of dealing with it. But typically that's what it'll look like when you peel off the rubber dam. And then this one now for the upper. Now on the upper, you may have to adjust the posteriors, cut them down. Maybe even the lingual of the anteriors of the upper, you may have to cut those temp coping down too, because they may interfere with the lower anteriors depending on what sort of occlusion is, right? If they're more of a class 2, they may be hitting. If it's an ideal class 1, it may not interfere with your bite for the pickup. You can leave them long and cut them after the fact, right? So typically that's what it'll look like. Here it looks like they cut them down. Here's the rubber dam. And then before you add the material in the denture and put over the temp coping, just make sure the temporary copings are blacked out. You can use impression material, Teflon, cotton pellet, whatever you use, just make sure you black those out, okay? Or make sure you have the doctor block them out. This is a case I did actually just a few days ago, and this was actually based off a fully guided type of case that we designed in-house. We made the surgical guide, and what we did is mill this out of one piece of PMMA. I don't believe it might have been a Yamahachi puck, actually. And so what we did was we kept, the patient had 2 molars, one here, one here. And what we did is we kind of overlaid it with our PMMA as a stabilization point. We also milled a little pad for the palate. And then on the front here, you can see it better here. We had a fixation pin, a fixation screw actually. So when the doctor had this seated and then put the fixation pin, the patient doesn't need to bite into it. Matter of fact, this patient was completely out. There was an anesthesiologist there. The patient was completely out. And so it's hard to have them open and close. If you've never really been chairside or you haven't seen that much, but especially when they're under anesthesia like that, trying to have them open and close is you have to manipulate it, but their tongue's sticking out, their tongue might be swelling, and you're trying to get them to close. It could be a nightmare. But this worked really, really well. And this, I actually did use the Stellar pickup material for this. I actually ran out with what I had, and then I used the pink Stellar back in the posterior just to solidify it. But then I do carry tooth-colored composite with me. I carry tooth-colored acrylic, so I can use either way. I think with this, I use tooth-colored acrylic. And I do have some red nylon rods that slide down through these chimney holes, and I can just go ahead and backfill it with acrylic. I don't need to worry about anything getting down there. Once that acrylic sets, that nylon rod just slides right out. I have a perfect access hole. I can tell you where I got those. So The people at In Sequence actually showed me what they were using, and that's what I use. I really like them. So now, right, the tissue sutured, healing caps. Just again, when your back's feeling it, you don't want to get acrylic onto the interface. You want to stay below. I would actually probably build that acrylic up even a little bit more. Remember, you can add a little bit more acrylic to these right in that kind of that center there. You want to build it up to have some either flat or some convexity actually. So you can build this up. The tissue's been flat, so the tissue's pretty mobile. It's got room. It could take some sort of pressure. You know, you're not bottoming out on the bone because you've taken a lot of that bone away. So you have a little bit more leeway the day of surgery to do that. So again, these temporaries are a little bit thicker. The final will definitely be thinner. You can contour it a little bit better. But typically, these are kind of the thicker. We want them to hold up. They're only acrylic with titanium copings through it. Like I said, I carry a bench lathe with me. Some doctors only have hand pieces, so this is how they would attack the pallet to help, you know, get rid of the pallet and contour and shape it. So this picture is kind of hard to tell. It looks like it may have a thicker buccal flange where it might be more undercut. I can't tell. I would trim and cut that and contour that a little bit more just to make sure there isn't any sort of concavity. Again, this is how they look sometimes. I think, you know, with my experience and once you've done a few, they actually look pretty good. They actually look really nice. So once you have that and that denture sticks out farther than the ridge and you have like a flat acrylic shelf now, you definitely want to taper that and angle that back. Even if you have to cut a little bit of the neck of the tooth back and contour it and shape it, you can add a little bit of the pink acrylic the day of to kind of cover that neck up. But you don't want a shelf there. Food will get packed in there. Patient's lip may get caught up in there. You want a smooth contour and round it right up to that crest of the ridge. Again, these are just some cases that, you know, what the patients are going home. This is what that'll look like when they go home, and they'll function with for 4 months typically, maybe longer. You know, if they're a smoker or a diabetic, they may wait to restore it, and they're going to be torqued to 15 Newton centimeters, and then the access hole will be blacked out. Doctors can just squirt some impression material, put some cavities, some permanent, whatever you want in there, Teflon, composite on top of the Teflon, whatever you want. Again, this is kind of what you would be ideal textbook. I can't remember from Facebook who put this on here, but when I saw this and how highly polished it is, and the acrylics just below, the copings, it's just, this is kind of a textbook look of what you want. Patients can get a floss threader in there and clean that up. They want to be able to, you know, it has to be a healthy prosthesis for them. You know, when they're home, they can get this clean over the next one. They're going to feel great in a couple of days. Sure, they may not look so good, but they actually feel great because this is a screw-retained prosthesis that's not pressing on the sore tissue. It's being supported by the bones. So I've had doctors call me and have me go back in a week or two to repair some of these because patient's been eating corn on the cob, or she broke it because she was eating a frozen Snickers bar, or, you know, and it's like, you know, it's soft foods, and it has to be. You know, anything you can cut with a fork is good. Scrambled eggs, fish, pasta. You don't want them having to tear or bite or anything with the front teeth, you know, like pizza or bagels, anything tough like that. Obviously, apples, you know. So patients have to understand this is an all acrylic prosthesis. It wasn't made for those forces, and it's just soft foods. I know it's tough because they're feeling great, especially in that 2 month, 3 month range. They're like feeling really good. And the thing is that prosthesis can't hold up. So, so here are some of the complications that happens to this. So if you get in this game, this was not contoured properly. This had cantilevers. It just was not, I don't know who did this. I found this on Facebook too. It was just horrible. And so, you know, you gotta watch out, because what will happen is, you know, patient will lose all the implants, and, you know, and then they'll have to go back in for more, or maybe they can't. I mean, it's just, It's just an unfortunate, sad situation. So don't be the technician that's leaving flanges and concavities. You want convexities to be prostheses, or flat, rounded. Typically what we see here is cosmetic fractures, right? Sometimes when you are doing these all on fours, this is just my own personal thought, but I believe when you have these patients that have super erupted teeth, maybe they had a TMJ issue because maybe they're having to alter their jaw a certain way to get their teeth to come back and to occlude, maybe into what we call a centric occlusion, but it may not necessarily be their centric relations. So once you take the patients out of this malocclusion and you put in something a little bit more flat plane and that they're occluding, that their jaw and the muscles might now, oh, you know what, we don't have that interference anymore. And now the lower jaw can now fully see it, and maybe their bite changes a little bit. And so they adjust it. And sometimes, that's why it's important to have doctors, to have the patients come back, monitor their bite, making sure they're equilibrated, make sure there's no big interferences, because typically they're cracking these, they're doing some sort of tooth loss or things like that. I can't tell in this picture, a friend of mine gave this to me, I can't tell if there's a metal substructure, the bar broke there, or if it was just some sort of metal reinforcement. But I mean, this is typically what you see. This does happen to all on fours for different reasons. It's not just because it's an all acrylic partial, may not have, or full acrylic temporary, but it could be maybe not enough bone reduction. Maybe, who knows what it is. It's not necessarily, oh, it's a lab's fault because their teeth broke off. Now, if the tooth breaks off cleanly, nice, and, then yeah, it didn't have a good bond. It didn't bond well, right? We see that with dentures sometimes. So one of the newer things that are out, and I have a kit of these. I have not used it yet. I'm anxious to use it, but basically you can Google it. It's smartdentureconversions.com, but I don't work for them. I bought a kit. I know Dora Rodriguez out there uses it, some other people. But basically, instead of having to hollow out the denture, drill the access hole, put the temporary copings on, backfill around it. I mean, what this basically does is on the left is it has its own temp coping with a plastic screw head that's attached to a metal screw head. And what you do is you seat this, you try in your denture, make sure it fits over, it bites in. They put some ball clasp on there to help align the bite, which you can do. And basically what they're doing is just loading it up with acrylic or a pickup material and seating it right over these. No access holes, no nothing are drilled or prepped. And then what they do is this kit comes with some burrs and drills that you can drill from the intaglio to drill your pilot hole. You're ready to go. So it actually saves a lot of time. So I'm really anxious to look forward to it. I wanted to share this with you. Somebody shared it with me, and I just like to pay it forward and pass it on. But I think this is something that's going to really take off more and more, developed by a prosthodontist. So typically when we do these cases, we can do it 3 ways. We can do a 3-appointment sequence. We can do a 5-appointment sequence. The 5-appointment sequence is the typical, okay, we're going to do a final impression. The doctor's going to send it to you. You're going to make a soft tissue model. And you might want to take a photo of this screenshot, because this is really a lot of the key here of most of this. And any full arch restorative cases all start very similar until you get to the diagnostic setup and all that's done, and you're ready to make what sort of implant prosthetic, whether it's a PMMA, zirconia, all on 4, an overdenture, relocator, whatever. They all have to start the same way. Doctor will take a final impression, send it to you. You make the soft tissue model, you fabricate a bite rim. I usually make it screw retained. I like to make it horseshoe, no flanges, with 2 temp abutments. Remember, your patient or that patient is wearing a temporary with no flanges and no palate. Don't make a bite rim that's screw retained with full flange extension and full palate. It'll feel like a mouthful to them. And so since it's screw retained, cut the palate out. cut the flange off, just lay it over the crest of the ridge and make your bite rim and make it screw retained, okay? And then the verification jig. And then the second appointment, the doctor will verify, make sure your impression or their impression and model is accurate, and take a bite registration. If again, some photos with the bite registration will be nice. The midline, the high smile line, cuspid elbow nose. We want all the information just as if you were making a full denture. And I know denture people get it, right? I know you had Tom Zaleski yesterday talking about dentures, and it's the same thing, right? We need to, I think denture people were more used to that than maybe crown and bridge techs, right? Because you already have the teeth there. Maybe it's not an issue. But for us, we have to have that information. So then they'll send it back. You will articulate the case. You're going to set and wax the Yamahachi teeth for a diagnostic and aesthetic try-in. You're going to send it back to the doctor, and they're going to do a try-in. When it comes back, you're going to reset it if needed. And then if it's a minor reset, if it's a major reset and you're all over the road, I would send it back for another reset or another try-in. So maybe it's a 6 appointment now. But if it's minor, you can go ahead and reset it, scan and design your bar in-house if you have some sort of scanner for bars, or send it to your favorite milling center. I know Preet does it. I know Pantera does it. There's plenty of people out there that do some great bars and some great designs. So that's something that I would do, look into a nice milling partner. And then when that bar comes back, what you're going to do is then you're going to transfer the teeth to that bar, set it, wax it, contour it, like if it's the final finished contour. You don't want flanges again. You don't want it long. Contour it and shape it as, so when it comes back and the doctor says, hey, it's beautiful, you did a great job, looks great, take it to finish. Now you could just unscrew it from the master model. You could screw in some analog, invest it and process it and finish it. There you go. I mean, typically for an all-on-4, that's how we do these types of cases, or all-on-5, 6, whatever you want. I like to have doctors who've never really done that before do that at least once or twice before we go on to the 3-step appointment. This 3-step appointment would be a technician from the laboratory going to the restorative doctor's office the day of impressioning. They would take an impression. I have analogs. I make a soft tissue model in the office. Once that's set, they give me the temporary. That's my verification jig, right? They're already wearing it. It's already a solid one piece. I'm verifying it right there. If there's an issue, I adjust the analog. I take it out, reposition it if I need to. Yes, there's other steps. You can, make a verification jig there if you want. You can even have the doctor lute it together in the mouth, which is really nice. Take a final impression that way. Whatever you want to do. I've had doctors take an impression underneath the temporary, which I don't like so much, because typically you're going to cantilever and you're going to want to pick up that ridge for your extensions, right, in an impression. So it's hard to get that sometimes just by taking a wash under a temporary. So now you could pick up that temporary in an impression, right? You can block out, maybe get some long pins, screws, they're longer, that'll stick out occlusally, and you can take an open tray right over that, take it out, put your analogs in, and make your soft tissue model. It's accurate. So then what I do is, once I get the soft tissue model made and the temporaries on it, I go ahead and I take the opposing model, I lute it together, and I go ahead and articulate it. I bring an articulator, maybe a Stratus, or whatever your preference is for an articulator. I bring it and I articulate it right then and there. And before I give them the temp back, because now the patient wants it, right? I got to wear it. I make a matrix of it, a labial matrix, silicone matrix. So I have how that temp fits to the model with that silicone matrix. Or I can duplicate it. I can, make a model right there in the office, and I can cross mount it. So now I have an articulation of their study, of what they're wearing, and then I have the model with the soft tissue. So I have everything I need. So the next, I bring it back to the lab. So the second step would be to set up the teeth, right? And then I would go ahead and scan it or send it out to have it scanned, bring it back, transfer the teeth on the wax for a bar. So the patient's second appointment, is a bar try-in with teeth, right? So we save the doctor a lot of chair time, we save them money, right? And then also patients love it too because it expedites it. They want their final now. And so then once everything goes well, ideally it should, right? But things happen. So you can adjust things, tweak things. You should be definitely in that ballpark. You wouldn't have to be remaking the bar typically. You're just resetting the teeth, re-waxing it, and then go ahead and take it to finish and be done with it. And you can send it off and have the doctor call you and celebrate how well the case went, right? So typically that 3 appointment, the way that would look is the doctor actually, this prosthodontist actually took the impression, mounted the models, verified the models, made some indexes for me, and sent that to me. And they wanted to get this expedited, right? The 3-step technique. So what I typically would do then is I would seat that matrix, how it lays on the model. I'd backfill that with wax, and I get a wax representation of what the patient's wearing. So then I don't want to lose my reference, so I just set 1 tooth at a time, right? So I know I haven't lost anything. I set it up. I think it's good. Occlusally, see how nice the teeth, the lingual anatomy, occlusal anatomy on these Yamahachi teeth are really nice. These teeth are really hard. Now these are the NS, these don't have the composite. But what's nice about it, if you use the NS in your denture fabrication and even for your all-on-4 conversion denture, what's nice is the molds match the composite teeth. What I used to do in the past is I would use, a tooth that, was one brand because it was economical. And then when I made the final, now we're using a whole completely different brand of tooth. It's not the same mold. And I will tell you, patients they love their final denture or their temp denture for the most part. They become accustomed to it. Family, friends, people have seen it. Now they don't really want to change much unless it's something way off and they don't care if people notice, but typically they want the same. But you could see, these teeth have a really nice blend, and sizely, for the cost, for these NS teeth, they're nice. They're beautiful. And take pictures of your work and share them on social media or give them to your doctors. Show them what you're doing, what you're creating. Maybe they want to put an article out. Maybe they want to do something. They want to share it. Maybe they'll put a book together for the patient's, waiting room. They want to show, look what me and my lab can do. We could definitely do this for you. We're professionals at it. So we got it set and we have it waxed. So he tried it in, loved it, everything went well, sent it back to me, so they go straight to finish. So I don't have the steps in between, but I have some steps later on here. But basically I just took this case from straight, I processed it when it came back, and I cleaned it up for him a little bit. I put some composite on there, some GC Opticolor glaze, some Annex-Net composite, things like that. But these teeth just occlude really nice, and these PX teeth are hard. It's like you take a burr and you want to adjust the occlusion, maybe to equilibrate it after processing. You look at your burr like, is my burr dull? Because it's not really grinding on this. But if you get let me go back here. I want to show you something. But you can see, look at that contour, right? No flanges, convexity. Get in there and clean it and keep it nice and clean. That's what you want. Now, sometimes patients may not like that, meaning the point is once you do it like that and the doctor puts it in, the patient goes home and wears it. Now, sometimes food might be able to get in there. They're blowing some air through there or things. So you may need to add a little bit of acrylic or composite. You may have to go back and add a little something seeping through there. But sometimes patients will try to talk doctors into extending that acrylic down more, making a flange. And if it's a screw retain, it's like you can't. That's why it's important, I think, this team approach on doing these types of cases is that the surgeon, the restorative doctor, and the lab all have to be on the same page. And this has to be explained to the patient. You don't want to be explaining it to the patient after they're wearing it, no one told them, and now things are getting changed. And, it's just, I even think doctors should explain the pros and cons of these types of cases, because if they break, now they're coming back, they're mad at the doctor. And, I learned this from going to the COIS center, it's like, you don't want to be the bad guy. It's like, I told you, you might be at high risk. You might be an ice chewer. You might bite nails. You might, bruxism. You have these parafunctional habits. But if you're making something that's very delicate, maybe save some veneers or something, it's like, don't you want to know on the front end the patient kind of does these kind of things? Because then you can explain to the patient, okay, maybe this isn't the best restorative option for you, but if this is what you want, I'll do it, but here's the risk. So when it does happen, the patient comes in, yeah, doc, you know what, you told me that might happen, yeah, I broke it, whatever. So now you're not the bad guy. But I think patients, and I don't know, maybe they are. I don't sit there and talk to the patient and the dentist. I don't know what's being told, but I just, for some of the things that patients have said to me, they get upset when these things happen, and it's like, they're like, I paid a lot of money for this, and you're here fixing it. I've only had it for 6 months, or whatever the case may be, and it's like, well, it's kind of typical for these, and that's one of the cons to these all-on-fours. Everything has pros and cons. There isn't one perfect restoration out there that is the end-all be-all that will never break, right? I mean, zirconia breaks. I mean, there's a lot of things that, again, a lot of pros and cons to everything. So typically I tell doctor, when we're going to do these, how long is it going to take? What's the outline? So for these 5 appointments, typically the first appointment, right, is taking the provisional off, taking an open tray impression, should take about an hour, and then send it, and the lab needs about a week to get a bite rim made, do some, make a verification jig, you may have to order some parts. I mean, whatever you want it to be, that's your timeline. And then if you go back for removal of the provisional, a wax try-in will be done. And once the wax try-in is really, the patient loves it, likes it, we're ready to go, then I'm going to scan it in-house, or I'm going to send it out. I'm going to have my bar made. I'm going to transfer the wax or the teeth and wax onto the bar, shape it, contour it, almost for finish. And I'm going to send it out for a final try-in. Hopefully, nothing needs to be done. No midline needs to be moved. No other sort of reset. Now I can take this to finish, get it processed, and they can deliver it. So it's typically about 5 appointments. If you're doing a zirconia and you're going to mill a PMMA, so let's say you do the workup, right? Model, diagnostic setup, wax try-in, everything's good, the verification jig. So now you mill a PMMA and you deliver the doctor a full PMMA. So that's, taking up one of the appointments. And now it's like, well, if they adjusted the PMMA significantly or want to change things, then you may have to redesign it, make another one, or make the changes digitally, go ahead and make your final. But there's a little bit more steps, but typically they go about the same way. So again, we saw this, we put the impressions in. After 4 months, 6 months, these patients look great. Now we're ready to go. Now we need to take an impression. And you may be there the day of impressioning, or they may call and ask you, well, how do I take this impression? What am I using? So I typically opt for the open tray. Now, if the patient's a severe gagger and you got to get in and get out, and, they're bucking while that impression material's set up, it's like you want to get in and get out. So I would do a closed tray. Okay. These are the Nobel open tray impression copings. They screw down. They have the longer pin that's sticking out. Typically, you're modifying a stock tray. Some doctors will send you a final impression. You can make a verification jig and a custom open tray over that so they can fix that up. We do that too. By all means, you can do that step. Just adds another appointment, right, for the patient for a preliminary impression. But for doctors who've never maybe done this a lot, you need to make sure that they unscrew it before they yank it out. I've had a couple impressions that were open tray, very aggressive copings, and they've ripped that out of the patient's mouth without unscrewing it. I don't know why. But these trays are good. They're stable. They're sturdy. They work well. And you want a full arch impression, almost as if you're making a full lower. I know we're not making a full lower. There are no extensions. But you want that information of where the tissue and the ridge are to help you contour and shape your all-on-4 final prostheses. You want that. Now these trays work really nice. These are a stock tray. They got a cellophane cover on the occlusal, so you don't need to mess around with trying to drill holes through the tray and where it's coming through. Now, I will say they take a lot of impression material because they're a little bit deeper for the copings, but if you load that up and take an impression, plus you can go ahead and take an impression with this over a verification jig if you want. These are really nice. I would highly recommend them. They come in different sizes. So here's what the closed tray impression copings look for. These are for the Nobel again. I know a lot of this is Nobel, but a lot of the major implant companies now have all these types of parts that you will need, closed tray, open tray. They all have the components for doing these. They are going to the multi-unit abutment. Okay, so when and where, like I said, I think as a patient, if they're a gagger and you need to get in and out for whatever reason, or maybe you're not comfortable wanting to do an open tray, I mean, it's your choice. We're still going to verify it. We're still going to verify the model no matter what. So then the purpose of the verification index is, right, we want to make sure the impression is accurate. It may look great, but it may not be accurate. Maybe the impression coping didn't get down all the way. Maybe it got hung up on tissue. We don't know. So the doctor, I like having it sectioned and have them luted together. They have these light pure jig gels you can use now. You don't have to use Duralay, but we can section it. And typically, I think the verification jig, obviously it's a very important tool. I think it's really important. And I'd like to, sometimes I think, in my opinion, doctors take a little bit more time with that, because there's times where we've had issues down the road after the fact. They said the jig was fine, but then there's an issue. So I'd really like to have doctors really take the time and do the test, the one screw test, you know, make sure it's seated, it's passive, there's no bounce. I mean, there's no other screws holding that in except the one screw. You want to make sure that this is passive, no bounce. If it is, cut it, double check it. I mean, spend the time with the tool. That's what it is. It's a tool. And we need it to make sure our model is accurate. Okay? There's different alternatives of how you want to make it. I'm not a big fan of the top ones there with the metal like that. If you want to do metal, you know, here these are indexed at the bottom. With like a kind of a V cut, you know, to help the doctor. But if you want to go metal, these ProTech ones are really nice. The Easy Bar system, and you can make a small investment and get a kit with all different sizes. And what's nice about it is if you need to make another temporary and you want to make it metal reinforced, you can use that inside your temporary. Just process acrylic around it, you know, maybe lute it to where it's sticking above a little bit so you can get acrylic underneath it. But it's a really good option. So again, we're taking our bite registration. You want to give us the information, a midline, cuspid lines, you know, from the L of the nose, high smile line, contour and shape that bite rim. The doctor should for us, so we can follow that. We want to make sure that this bite is recorded, it's repeated, and it's verified is the biggest thing. Again, face bow transfer, we're good with that, right? We would love to have that. I like mounting these cases on a big articulator, big like semi-adjustable articulator. So again, the Yamahachi teeth I really, really like for these types of cases. I mean, I got great contact points and abrasion forms. They're very wear resistant. The surface texture, especially like you saw on those NS teeth, and maybe I have another picture of it here. The surface texture, the blending, the aesthetics. I mean, especially for the cost. I mean, for what we pay for them. I mean, it's a nice way for a lab to make some revenue on their teeth. And with some implant or some tooth companies not making some certain denture teeth anymore, you might be looking for you know, another tooth selection. But I highly look into this for these types of cases and even for dentures. They're readily available. Hardly have any hard time getting these teeth. I don't have issues with back order. I tried to order some portrait IPN last week sometime, and for a certain mold and shade I wanted, didn't seem very out of the ordinary, but it was like a 2-week turnaround or back order. So I ended up using Yamaha So this turned out nice. They're strong. The structure, it's got that composite. It's got kind of a composite blend. The acrylic, it's got a notch there for retention. I mean, they're just a really nice tooth. Very hard, very wear resistant. Here you can see that's an old denture there. How well that, or how horribly, or I should say, well worn that is. And here's the crown PX teeth. This shot's kind of hard to see the surface texture. And I think I have another picture of the other one. But I really like it. They come in all the shades. That W0.5 is probably one of my favorite shades. It's just a little lighter than an A1, a little darker than the, the bleach. It's just a really, really pretty looking tooth. Jack Turbyfield likes them. I like Jack a lot. I respect him. I was actually using him before I think he was. Dr. Hallis in the center there is a good friend of mine. He's helped with a lot of video and pictures and things that I have for this presentation. But he uses them. He has a stock of them in his office, and he sends them to me for doing a case. So it's nice that he's picking out the mold and shade. I don't really need to do it. So now it's the wax try-in stage, right? We want to get these cases set, waxed, get ready for a try-in to go out, and doctors send us photos, what it looks like, and it looks great. They go ahead and let's make the bar. So the design, right, we want retentive features in our framework. We don't want the acrylic to just break off a smooth retentive frame. We want that frame to support the teeth. That's why we don't make the bar at the time of the bite rim or when they take the final impression. I don't make the bar until I had a tooth try-in verified and ready to go, because I'm going to design that framework to fit within the realms of the wax try-in. So you have to have these teeth set before you design them. The proper AP spread, we'll talk a little bit about that, but you want to make sure that we're not violating anything. They come in all different types of shape to help with the fracture: an I-shaped bar, Y-shaped, L-shaped. The framework can be treated. We can sandblast it. We can GC primer. We can we opaque these. Sometimes, depending on who I'm sending it to, I may have the company opaque it for me, so I don't have to mess with it. It's ready to go when it comes back, and that bar needs to, I believe it's like a 4x4 type of what you want. Sometimes it could be a little less, but here, these are scan bodies. This is an old Nobel scanner. This video was taken a long time ago. It's probably, I look much younger, probably still fat there, but anyway, you can see I have the ability to design that in-house if I want, or what I like is sending it out also and having some really nice bars made. So any of these cases, they all start the same way, like I said before. If you're making a hater bar, a mill bar, Paris bar, wraparound, Montreal, a bar with pins for retention, you have to do all these steps. You have to go through this anyway. Different wraparound type of bars. You can get the bar opaque, tooth colored, on the facial, because maybe your teeth are right up on that bar. You don't want pink showing through, but you can have the pink on the lingual. I mean, whatever you want, it can be done. These manufacturers that are milling bars nowadays, with what they can do, milling out of titanium, chrome, zirconia. I mean, it's just amazing what they can do. Just some different designs. You can even get some of these with an angulated screw channel. Now you might be like, well, why would we need an angulated screw channel if they're using a multi-unit abutment? They've already, kind of worked that out. But sometimes the multi-unit isn't, you get cases that maybe you weren't involved with, and a multi-unit's a certain position, and they're not going to change it. So we don't want the access hole to come through the facial. So now we have an opportunity to have a bar made with an angulated screw channel to go to that multi-unit. So it's just a nice tool to have. You never know when you're going to need it. You could do some sort of vertical stop. You can use metal occlusal. You could do ceramage. You can do whatever you want to help with that occlusal, wear. And if you have somebody that's a really heavy brush or something out of the ordinary, but I typically wouldn't do that. I want to use the denture teeth. That's why I like the composite teeth. I want to have some resiliency. You don't want it to be too hard and really bang against those implants. So again, the AP spread, we want to make sure we're not cantilevering too far. And I know there are some different camps about arguing how you measure it or what they recommend for AP spread. But I know when I use like BioHorizons and Vulcan, they're very strict on their cantilever. Some companies might measure it and feel they can go longer. So I'm not sure what their different companies' different theories are. I should probably look into that a little bit more and ask them why, why they allow more versus other ones. But typically it's built into the software. If you're designing in the lab, it'll actually measure and calculate and tell you what that cantilever maximum length is. So, but you just want to make sure that, on the mandible here, Charles English, they have, the bone density. There's just a lot of things to take into account of this. But typically, it really hasn't been an issue. But in the mandible, you can kind of do that 10 to 12 millimeter posterior cantilever. But again, I like measuring the implants to make sure and kind of go through what my laboratory or our laboratory, what we feel safe with going with. So whatever is recommended. So here, probably not the best position or where the teeth were, or I'm not sure why, but issues. Again, this is kind of what a typical wraparound bar may look like. I would just kind of a sample cut just to show the difference, but I would definitely taper this more and get rid of that hanging ledge there, especially if it's a sample and you're going to show that to somebody. Typically, this is what they'll look like. You want to take them in, you want to get them polished, you want to make sure they're past the fit back onto the model, you want to make sure you equilibrate it, make sure you fine tune everything, and then when doctor puts it in, they're going to evaluate all of this. And they'll let you know, just like they would for any other prostheses that you are delivering. And again, if it's a typical all-on-4 bar, if it's Nobel, it'll be torqued to 15 Newton centimeters. So you get some really nice cases here. This lowers the high water, but it's really transformed some patients. I mean, it's I know sometimes all-on-4 may get a bad knock sometimes, but it really is a tool and a lifesaver for a lot of patients. Is it for every patient? No, but at least it's a tool out there. This patient here, you can see on the lower left, this patient had a zygoma implant, 2 zygomas and 2 anterior, and you may see that. That's more obviously on the surgeon's responsibility. As far as restoratively, we can do the same thing and we would treat it just as we would doing like a typical all-on-4, unless the surgeon states something differently, but typically you can treat it that way. You want patients to be able to get in and clean under your prostheses that you made for them. Sometimes the doctor might say, hey, make sure you cut or put in a floss channel for me. Not everybody asks for them, but sometimes you might have somebody that'll ask for it, maybe a certain type of a situation where the tissue might be a little higher up and it may need harder to get into, so they may have you cut in a flossing notch. So just so you can see what that is. And then even with the high water, right? These patients sometimes have a hard time keeping them clean. Maybe they've lost their teeth for a reason, right? And then now they're having implants and maybe they're not cleaning as much, or maybe their chemical makeup in their body and their saliva, they're just more susceptible to building up tartar and calculus. And so they need to go in and get it cleaned. And, doctors will ask me, hey, how can we clean this? Can we use a metal, scaler? Do we use plastic? And I would say, yeah, you'd want to use plastic. You want to get that patient cleaned up really nice. And I would still have them back for a 6-week follow-up. I have doctors asking me, and I'm like, I would still want to see them every 6 weeks to make sure everything's fine, not once a year, until it's too late. Maybe maybe for the first year after they get it, you're going to see them every 4 months, just to make sure they're keeping the hygiene up and everything's looking good. None of the multi-unit abutments have come loose, which they shouldn't, but they have. So you just want to check on everything before it gets too bad. But implants can do amazing things, right? These full arch type prostheses case. Now this was in conjunction, this is what the patient had an orthodontic setback of the lower ridge because they were very protruded. But this is just makes a whole difference in this patient's life. You can see here that after the orthodontic setback, upper implants were placed, all on 4 was placed, just a nice case. I mean, look at the difference. I mean, he just looks great, just really nice. So I know we're coming up to, so probably have like 27 minutes maybe, but I wanted to show you another way of doing some of these cases, maybe with a different type of bar and things. This is the case that I did for the Pantera Master Cup, but a lot of these steps and what I had to do to fabricate this is basically the same thing what we're doing, right? You're going to need a soft tissue model. We're going to make verification jigs. We're going to do bite rims. We're going to get it articulated. We're going to do tooth setup. We're going to wax it, obviously. We're going to do that try-in. And then when it comes back, we're going to wax it up for processing and get it finished, maybe tissue tint it, maybe make it look pretty. But again, all these cases start very similar. You have to follow the same steps for these full arch cases. And Peter Peasy talks about it in his thing about emotional dentistry. And this is one thing that I was not shocked, but just surprised that this happens at the end of surgery. I mean, to sit there and see this in person, I'd go and do this every day and help people, because at a laboratory, we don't get to see that, right? We don't get to see that emotional side of the patient. But when I see that and they see it for the first time, they start crying, they get up, they're hugging everybody in the room, thank you. And I feel like, well, I didn't do much, I'm just a small part of it. But to really see how happy they are, you got to remember, they may have been dealing with teeth that look horrible for many years, and there's a psychology part to this that patients maybe aren't talking to people as much, they avoid people, and now they'll have the confidence that they look great, and so now obviously I think this video I found on the internet, but it was one that I could show what I see without videotaping somebody, but this guy wasn't very emotional, but it looked good for him, but it's just amazing to see that side. And I like hanging out and while the doctor's, torquing the temporary in, adjusting the occlusion, having a family member come in and take a look at it. I mean, it's just a very satisfying aspect that we hardly ever see as technicians. And so by going chairside, just even for the conversion and seeing what they look like, how you kind of did a small makeover for them, it's amazing. And what you've done for them is just, can't be any better for you, as a human being and trying to help another person, right, with respect and giving them a better quality of life. So again, we know this, the purpose of the verification jig is to go ahead and make this, and we want to verify that the doctor's impression / our model is accurate, right? So then we get bite rims. We want to make sure we have a nice facial contour. We want that midline. We want the high smile line. We want the cuspid line of the ala and nose. We want that. Now that was the special bite rim that I had to use to mount the case for the Pantera Master Cup, and that's why it's section, or it's one piece type of thing. But let me go forward here. But it's the same concept. We need to have the bite rims. And like I said, our dental technicians that are out there, right, we're already doing this. So this is the information we expect, but not a lot of times we get it right. Sometimes it's like, well, there's no midline mark, there's no shade on the prescription, and then there's other doctors that type everything out and so detailed, it's great. So, but these are the things we really need. So if any sort of modification or thing needs to be done, the dentist needs to make sure that they contour and shape these rims the way we're supposed to follow it. I had a doctor recently that, a case that was done and he wanted to make sure that you follow my bite rim because I'm contouring and shaping it. And because some people don't. So it's a thing now. It's instead of it being the standard care, which it should be, now it's like they're calling to let you know they did it versus typically it's not happening, correct? So want to just make sure, right, the clinical assessment of lift support, this will all be done chair side. The doctor will relay this information to you. You can do a Facebook. You can use the quick analyzer. Again, here's my bite rim. So what I did is when I measured from the midline to the left here, my left, but you could kind of see it's 26 millimeters, and here it was 24. So am I going to leave some diastemas? Am I going to use two different sets of teeth? Am I going to use a bigger cuspid, or what am I going to do? So I just had to make sure I analyzed that. Just don't want to cut it off and start setting it. Now my cuspid's not falling where it needs to be. Again, I'm a big proponent of all these different types of articulators that are out there, these nice tools that we have to use. My biggest thing is making sure we're mounting on these articulators correctly. That's why I like the Coist table. I like being able to mount that upper with the Coist table, or Coist doctor will take a bite registration with the Panadent plate so I can feed it right on there and I know I'm on and mount that. But with the Stratus, they do have a table for that. But in this, I didn't have one when I did this case, but I looked at their instructions, and was following it. They have the incisal indicator, and read the instructions. Make sure that you're mounting these cases to the articulator the way they were intended to be. Because if you mount them too high or too low or too forward or too back, and you go into excursions, it's going to be different once it gets in the mouth. At least you're closer. You're going to be closer to what the Bonwell triangle is here in the articulator to help with our occlusion when you go into excursions and things like that. You want to make sure that you're spot on. Want to make sure your occlusal plane is, this articulator is made to have a rubber band sit back in the strut here, and there's a little indentation for that rubber band to go right underneath that incisal pin indicator, and that shows you where your occlusal plane is. So when you mount that with some setting stone, make sure we have it's positioning it forward in the articulator where it needs to be. The pin is your stop, and then the occlusal plane is your stop for this way. Where do I need to be in the articulator? It's very important, and it's predictable, right? This is the whole thing about these cases. When you're doing these big complex cases, and these cases are anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, depending on what you're making. It's like mounting it on a tool that's going to help you succeed and be predictable is really needed. I wouldn't put it on a hinge articulator. I wouldn't put it on a little Foster with a pin. I would put it on a semi-adjustable. And make sure your cases look good, right? Wet sand them. Make sure they look clean. Seal it with varnish. Make nice presentation when the doctor gets this. And, you'll see here when we wax these cases and you make them look so natural and you send it for the try-in, it impresses the doctor, it impresses the patient, it installs confidence into the patient and the dentist that we know what we're doing, we're capable of doing that, and we're going to charge them for it, right? I mean, that's why these are higher price ticket items. These are soft tissue models. The upper was an Ari Bork bar, which is almost like it's not a spark erosion, but it kind of seems similar to that. And what this is it's a bar that has actually they're milling two bars. They're milling the primary bar, and then they're milling the superstructure. And the superstructure has these two MK1 attachments that lock it in position. in the anterior has a 25-degree angulation to it in the front. So it seats in the anterior, and then it rotates back into the posterior. Patient locks it in. It's like having an all-on-4, but yet removable for cleansability. This would be the patient that I would make for a loved one or for myself or somebody that I really care about. I really like this as an option. Sometimes patients need a flange. You know, these all-on-4s don't have a flange, or the patient may have an excessive vertical smile, meaning that when they smile, you see all their teeth and a lot of gum, right? And so they can't have a or you may have to reduce a lot of bone to just hide that junction, and it might be just too an aggressive surgery to do that. So why not do something like this? Because they can bite into an apple, they can bite into whatever they want, and this isn't going to dislodge or move. If anything, maybe the prostheses, what's sitting on top of the superstructure, maybe that might break with excessive force. But no, I mean, this prosthesis is not going to dislodge. Like even if you were to put 4 locators on an upper denture, make it a horseshoe, and the patient snaps onto it, they can still bite into something hard enough, they'll dislodge it and it'll pop, right? It is not coming out. Unless the patient takes a push pin from the buccal aspect, there's a small hole when you finish it that the patient has this pin and they can push it from the buccal towards the lingual to unlock those pins, and then they can take out that prosthesis. And it works really, really nice. And when you do these types of cases, I mean, they're just great, especially with these Yamahachi teeth on them, the beautiful composite teeth. It's just nice. And that's what the patient will see inside the intaglio of their prosthesis. There is no acrylic. There is no broken down acrylic, cracked acrylic, discolored acrylic down in there. And then it's got to be relined if there's an issue, or, you know, it's just a really, really nice. We didn't have these options, right? Years ago. I mean, you could, I mean, back in the day, these were done. You had to wax and cast that primary bar, and you know, and cast it out of gold, right? Nowadays, it would just be so expensive that you couldn't do these for these patients. And then you would have to make that superstructure. You'd have to do kind of a gold galvano type of sleeve. Then you'd have to wax and cast a partial sleeve to fit over it to support that galvano. I mean, it was just a lot of work. And again, I just want to show this. Ruth Bork, she would do a lot of that with John Coyce, you know, back in the day. And so they started milling the primary bar, but nobody would mill the superstructure. And now you can. Now that can be done. And it's just a great option. So that was done on the upper. And the lower was a typical hybrid bar, which looks great. It was perfect for the lower. And so what I did then is I had these matrices I had that I took of the bite rim. And then what I did was I made a silicone matrix. You can see I captured the high smile line. So I had 2 separate matrices over here on the right. So I had one for a smile, and I had one right where I would set the edge of the anterior teeth. I knew how far facially I needed to be. I did use the Total Prosthetics and Function by Professor Gerber, and I like using this a lot. I wish I had more time to use it in the lab art side. Sometimes I can't, but if you want this PDF, it is online. If you can't find it, let me know. I will send you the PDF. But it's interesting to read as denture technicians to kind of read the philosophy on this and how that's done. It makes total sense as for dentures. It really does. And then again, this is how I transferred it in my documentation. And then capture all the information, right? We want to know where these bite rims are and you know, get any sort of quality control. What I like here is by measuring this, if you're having someone else set that up, you know that they follow the rim, because you could take this measurement here from the pin to the facial of the rim, write it down, it's 42. And once they're done with the setup and you go to check it to see if they're still at 42 and didn't move it on you, you know, it's a good way to quality control that. And I got this compass, a profile compass from Candular. I didn't know anyone else that I could find it from, but that's where I got it from in case somebody was wondering that you need that to use it to mark these models. So just, again, following the silicone matrix for my tooth setup, I'm where I need to be facially, midline. I get my teeth set up. I got the silicone matrix there, see where I'm at. And then I use the 3D setup template, which I really like. And I don't use it a lot, but I think it's a great tool for teaching newer setup technicians as a way to help them and teach them with these setups. And it really builds in that curve of speed and Wilson. And it really, I will say, when the competition was judged, one of the judges said that they loved the occlusion, and when they checked it, they said it was spot on. And I think this was a really big help on that. But you can do these types of things with these types of cases, these high-end cases. That's why I love doing these types of cases. And then I like to make it, like I said, I want to wax it up. I want to impress the doctor and the patient. I want them to see what they're going to get. I mean, so I'm meant to go back here, but make sure you're getting some good waxes. Demahachi has some really nice waxes and stuff for these types of cases. Make sure you use a quality wax. Now, my wax up here, I will say it's a little aggressive and maybe a little not as filled in the facial, because I'm going to process this and then I'm going to add pink composite to that. So I didn't want to wax it all full contour and make it look pretty and then just grind it all away. So I kind of made it look pretty without, doing that. And I wasn't going to build in my gingival margins with composite. I was going to leave that in acrylic because I was going to do some intrinsic colorization where I did it at the polymerization or the curing stage. But just kind of see, wax these things up really nice. And maybe you already do, right? There's some people out there on social media. I'm in awe of what some of these technicians are doing. Now in this picture here, people will ask me, it's like, well, what about these pins? You don't leave those, right? No. When the case is processed and finished, and then I'll cut those off, rubber wheel them, and they'll be smooth, and they'll fit up right up against the tissue or the acrylic. So it's smooth and comfortable to the patient. So again, Richard Greenlist on Facebook, that upper, the denture, there's a lower partial, but it's just amazing the characterization that he does on these types of cases. And maybe it's not, something that we can do in our laboratory, but it's still, as a technician, you can appreciate the time, the effort, and the artistry of what they're doing. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. So I invested these cases. I invested in, I put analogs into my lower hybrid. I took it off the model, screwed analogs. You don't want to process on the master model because you know that when you deflast that, sometimes you have a chance of breaking that model, and you don't want to send this case out to a doctor on a broken model or no model at all. I would put analogs into your wax up and invest your wax up into stone, sink the analogs into the bottom half of the flask here, and leave it at that. And then the upper was, I had to make a silicone model to fit within the realms of that titanium superstructure. I didn't want acrylic to get in there and underneath it. And I also added stone to cover those pins to help hold it down. I didn't want that to move. So again, you want to wax your cases, invest them, and I know this isn't that case, but I'm just pointing out that making sure that your investment in stuff are clean, smooth, no stone, right? You want it clean and nice. You don't want stone breaking off and getting into it. I do use this silicone from Drevi. I like it because it keeps stone from getting in between the interproximal of the teeth and having to pick it out or sandblast it or luminous oxide and things like that. This really helps, makes it really nice. There's other ones on the market, obviously. It's just one of the ones that I use. You can kind of see here. And I make it kind of retentive, so the stone will grab around it and it'll hold into the stone. Again, if the bar is not opaque, I sandblast it. Some manufacturers that mill the bar for you will already send it sandblasted, so I'll GC primer it, and I will go ahead and do an opaquing of it. Opaque the sleeve. You can get these opaque from the manufacturer, but I had to opaque these. And then I did the internal coloring. Used the candular, and then I used the IVA base with the IVA cap. My colorization, kind of throwback from the turbifill technique of branching technique, making dentures and colorizing them. I just did a little bit. This is how I processed them. And then finishing, right? Remove the screws, seat the case, equilibrate it, final finish it, tissue tint it. This is now putting the icing on the cake, making this come to life. This is my favorite part. Contour, finish it. Now I'm going to add color to this, right? Now I'll equilibrate it before I add the color, and then I'll tissue tint it. Again, I use the Annex 10 gum. I like. Another guy you should follow on social media, Lee Mullins. I learned a lot of my composite techniques from Lee when he came to the States with Phil Reddington, and they did a BDT technique. Showed us that when that first came out about 3 years ago now, maybe, with the pectin substructure with individual Emax crowns and pink composite and a Drevi nano varnish that really seals it really nice. But it's just amazing what technicians are doing. You know, I don't think I could do that internally to get that look. I mean, I see some people do some great stuff like Eugene and Brian Carson, you know, they can do some, but in my hands, for whatever reason, the composite just seems to work better for me. And this is the case kind of finalized. I have a color map I could share. It's not something I always do. I don't think everybody's the same, right? You want to do it a little different, like a painting, right? Every painting's different, right? And so I characterized the teeth. I colored the teeth with GC Opticolor glaze. And put them in size of wear marks. I put some composite fillings, but basically, these are the types of things you can do, and predictably. And it doesn't have to be just these full arch cases. It could be an upper overdenture. It could be an upper, you know, like this case here. You know, just a small bar overdenture. I think it was a cancer patient or something. They want a small piece, and that would go here. And I've got the Yamahachi teeth on here. I mean, it just turned out nice. And when I do the coloring to these, it just really sets it apart. And then these are cases that we did that were highlighted by Pantera. I mean, we're doing a lot of these. I mean, we're doing these cases monthly, right? We're getting these big full arch implant cases where we're doing, you know, metal substructure, thimble type prep that are billed for us, and then it comes back opaque and anodized, and maybe put some Emax or zirconia. You know, here it's a small section. I believe it was a lower interior. We had to use an angulated screw channel in one of them because there was an issue. And then this, I think the patient had an issue with, I may have a defect in the palate or something. They had to have a full palate and not a horseshoe, because people would ask me, well, why wouldn't you do a horseshoe? It's like they wanted a palate. So I called Pantera and I said, can you mill me something that I can have a palate support it? Sure enough, they got it, you know. So again, to reiterate, I know we're winding down here. You guys probably want to go home and that kind of stuff. You're tired of hearing me blabbing, but again, a lot of these popular restorative options that I see out there now are these Almacor hybrid, obviously, full zirconia, obviously, a milled metal substructure with individual crowns that be cemented, whether it's either Emax or zirconia. Crystal Ultra with the Trilor, that's gaining popularity. We do that. We do those here. Javor is out there, another type of peak substructure. I can do that with Yamahachi teeth on them, process, make something unaffordable all up for, maybe not having the cost of milled titanium bar, but maybe something a little bit less expensive. And sometimes it's what the patient can afford, and just knowing that if we have enough restorative space to make these high precision polymer substructures strong enough, we need that restorative space, right? I'm not going to do it where I'm kind of being shorthanded on space, but yeah, and the BDTs, right? Lee or Phil, what those guys have shared to the world, basically, it's being done all over the world, and that's one of my favorite prostheses, also too. If I'm going to do something screw-retained, I love that look of individual crowns, and sometimes when you do like a full arch zirconia, there are some guys that can do it. I mean, Bill Murray, there's some guys that can really make zirconia look beautiful and authentic, and it's stressful. It's a lot of work, but in certain hands it can look great. But the possibilities are endless. We can do whatever we want nowadays, pretty much, with these types of cases, and it's just a matter of the foundation, right? Knowing. Even maybe you don't want to do conversions, that's not your business model, you don't want to do that, that's fine. But at least today, I was able to share with you that these are things that you need to know where that patient and where they're coming from. And when they send you those final impressions, when you get that impression, it's like, look at all the work that was done here. Don't screw up that impression, right? Make a nice silicone soft tissue model, maybe scan it and have some sort of a backup, or I don't know, but a lot of work has gone into that, and now you get to create the masterpieces that go onto it. And I know some people in the audience, there are some very talented technicians there, if not everybody's talented, right? If you've been in this business long enough, you've kind of put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, just as I have. I commend you guys for being technicians. I did see a little bit earlier, you guys were giving awards for CDT, people that have been doing it for many years, as I have, and I congratulate all of you guys and girls that have done that and followed through this career. This has been a great career for me, and I just love it, and I'm glad I got to share. Just real quick, some things. Another thing is, when I do some of these full arch cases, doctors want me to make a mouth guard, kind of maybe a full zirconia, or these types of cases. The patient wear it at night if they have a parafunctional habit, something to protect it. I've been milling. I get a clear PMMA puck from Yamaha because they're only like 20, 23 bucks, and compared to other pucks, but it's super clear. I mill it and roll in 5SS mill, and they stick great. Doctors really love them. The density of it, they're crystal clear. It's really nice. I do a lot of printed night guards too for these types of cases, but I just wanted to share that, these are some of the things that Yamaha have. They can support you. I don't want to sound like a sales pitch. I really don't. I don't like that, but I mean, these are just some things that I like. And what if we were at a bar having a beer together after this? We talk about, hey, I'm sharing that with you. Now I just don't have a beer in front of me, and you probably don't either. But again, just look at the blend. These are the NS teeth I was telling you about, the blend of these teeth. And I don't know the price offhand, but I know we can get you that information, or Yamaha can. So if you want to reach out to me, take a screenshot. WilliamsonMark@me.com is my email. Again, I work full time, so my job is very important to me. So I'll get back to you as soon as you email me, whether lunchtime or in the evening. And or if you have any questions regarding Yamaha products, because I don't work for them, I don't really sell their products or anything. But Larry Greenwald with Yamaha, that's their number. I know they were a sponsor. You may have already been to the booth. Maybe you already used their teeth. That's great. Ralph Morrow is, like I mentioned before, he's a dental technician his whole life, Navy trained. He can help you in any ways also, if maybe you can't get a hold of me. But he's the national sales manager for them. He's worked for, I think Ivoclar, Dent Supply. He sold all different types of teeth. So he knows what you've been using or maybe still use and how they compare. But anyway, enough of my yapping. So I want to thank you all. I can't really see you. I just see my screen, so I'm just talking to a screen for the past 2 hours. But again, thank you to the DLAT and to Matt Douglas, the president, and thanks for having me, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Can you Can you hear me okay? Mark, can you hear me? Check, 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 check.
Can you hear me?
Nope. I can hear you. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Oh, I can.
All right. Just want to say hi. Hey, everybody look back here. On this camera right here, everybody's wave. Let's give Mark a big round of applause. Thank you for all your information.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
For closing our conference for us, and we hope to see y'all next year.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd be happy. I could take this to, we could talk more about full zirconia, full PMMAs, maybe the individual middle substructure, more high end now that we've done the basics and all that. So yeah, I would love to. You just let me know.
All right. Well, we'll go have that beer, and you go have your beer, and
I will.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Thanks, everyone.